We are witnessing a radical tectonic shift in American foreign policy. And I mean, this isn't just about politics. This is a deliberate, calculated strategy to completely reshape global trade, to weaponize the economy, and to reassert American dominance through a playbook that's being called Maritime Mercantilism. So let's get right into it.
You know, this quote right here, it's not just talk. It is the absolute mission statement for this new era. It's the underlying philosophy for dropping decades of international cooperation in favor of a much more aggressive go-it-alone strategy, where American power is the #1 tool for getting what it wants. And this is the name they've given it, Muscular Mercantilism. Just think of it as a modern-day throwback to an era when nations used all their economic and military might to benefit themselves, and yeah, often at the expense of everyone else. It's a total rejection of that old idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. In this new world, it's all about making sure the American boat rises highest, period. Okay, so if you're a superpower, how do you start to flex those muscles? Well, you start by rebuilding your own strength, right? And in this case, that meant going after a huge critical weakness in America's industrial base, its shipbuilding capacity. Let's take a look at the blueprint for this revival. Less than 1%. Just let that sink in. That is how much of the world's commercial shipbuilding is actually done in the United States. Now, this isn't just an economic issue, not by a long shot. It is a massive national security vulnerability. I mean, think about it. If a major conflict were to break out, the U.S. would be dependent on its main rival, China, to build and repair the very ships that are the lifeblood of the global economy. Realizing this, well, that was the spark that ignited a brand new, sweeping plan. So this timeline here, it really shows you the birth of the Maritime Action Plan, or MAP. It all kicked off with an executive order in April 2025 that set a really tight deadline. But you'll notice the plan was delivered 100 days late. Now that delay, it isn't a sign of failure. No. It's a testament to the sheer massive scale of what was being put together. A complete top-to-bottom overhaul of American maritime strategy. The plan itself is built on these 4 pillars, and they're all designed to create this self-sustaining ecosystem. See, it's not just about building ships. It's about building the shipyards, training the workers to do the jobs, protecting the entire industry with new trade policies, and then tying it all directly into national security. It's the whole shebang. So the big question is always, how do you pay for all this? Well, this is where the mercantilism part gets really muscular. The plan calls for a universal vessel fee. Basically, it's a tax on all foreign-built commercial ships that dock at U.S. ports. Let me repeat that. Foreign competitors are essentially being taxed to pay for America's own industrial comeback. It's incredibly audacious. All right, so having a powerful new domestic plan is one thing, but how does it actually play out on the world stage? Well, as fate would have it, a crisis in the Middle East gave the U.S. the perfect, and I mean perfect, opportunity to test out this new muscular approach. When conflict basically shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil choke point, just look at this incredible imbalance. China depends on that strait for nearly 38% of its crude oil. The U.S., a tiny 2.5%. This just perfectly lays out the immense strategic leverage that this crisis handed to Washington on a silver platter. And this question, this is the absolute core of what people started calling the Hormuz Hypothesis. The theory goes that the U.S. is intentionally dragging its feet on reopening the strait, using the global oil shock as a powerful tool of economic warfare to squeeze concessions out of everybody, rivals and allies alike. And here's exactly how they seized that control. When all the traditional insurers in places like London and Tokyo pulled their war risk coverage for ships in the area, the White House just stepped right in. It created its own government-backed reinsurance facility. This single move effectively gave the U.S. an on-off switch for about 20% of the entire world's oil trade. Unbelievable. Now, economic leverage is one thing, but remember, this strategy is called muscular for a reason. Operation Epic Fury was the military piece of the puzzle, designed to completely neutralize any threat to American control of this vital waterway. Just to give you a sense of the sheer intensity here, over 11,000. That's the number of targets that were struck by the U.S. and its partners in just the first 40 days of the operation. The mission was described as being laser-focused on one thing: dismantling Iran's ability to threaten the strait. And by all accounts, the air campaign was a huge success. It absolutely decimated Iran's offensive capabilities. But the sea is a whole different beast.
Even after weeks of intense airstrikes, the strait itself was still blocked by mines. This forced the U.S. to take on the slow, dangerous job of clearing the waterway itself, which is a pretty stark reminder that even overwhelming military power doesn't always equal immediate control. But this new doctrine wasn't just for the Middle East. At the very same time, the administration was making an even bolder power play, this time much, much closer to home. The goal? To secure an entire hemisphere. Enter the Donroe Doctrine. It's basically a 21st century update to the old Monroe Doctrine, the long-standing American policy of telling foreign powers to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. But this new version is way more aggressive. It's about actively kicking out any influence from rivals like China and Russia. And it didn't take long for this new doctrine to be put into action. On January 3, 2026, Operation Absolute Resolve went live. And as you can see from this timeline, it was a swift, surgical strike. A massive force descended on Caracas in the middle of the night, capturing Venezuelan President Maduro. And the U.S. reported 0 casualties, apparently thanks in part to some new classified tech, including something they called a discombobulator that just neutralized all the defenses.
And this was the prize. By bringing Venezuela into the U.S. orbit, the grand plan is to create a North American energy superpower, an integrated bloc, the U.S., Canada, and now Venezuela, that will control roughly 30% of the entire world's proven oil reserves. That is an almost unbeatable strategic advantage.
But, seizing control is one thing. Actually unlocking all that potential is something else entirely. Venezuela's oil industry has been absolutely ravaged by years of corruption and neglect. As you can see here, it's going to take a massive, long-term investment to get production back to where it needs to be. But hey, for a nation that's playing the long game of mercantilism, that's a price they seem more than willing to pay. So when you put all these pieces together, the industrial plan at home, the crisis in Hormuz, the intervention in Venezuela, what you're left with is a fundamentally new world order. Yeah, and this chart just lays it out perfectly, the old world versus the new. We are shifting from a system that was, at least in theory, about global rules and alliances, to a new reality defined by brute force, strategic leverage, and a relentless, unapologetic focus on national profit. So here's the main takeaway. The United States is now using its military, its financial clout, and its energy power as giant levers to achieve one singular goal: to rebuild its own industrial base and to guarantee its own supremacy in what is becoming a much more fractured and competitive world. There's no doubt this aggressive new strategy has created a new reality. It's a really high-stakes gamble, and it's playing with the stability of the entire global economy. It has absolutely established a system for American dominance, but that leaves us with the final big question. In a world where every major power now starts to play by these same ruthless rules, how long can that dominance possibly last?